I think I would say that I wasn't at all clear that it was going to be my brigade which was chosen. I couldn't particularly see any reason why. And actually, all my other commanding brigadiers were telling me that their brigade was going to go. So I was extremely surprised when 7th Armoured Brigade was chosen, although I knew we were the best. And the reason for being chosen is we had the very latest equipment, and we were also all in one place, because you've got to remember, a lot of people were in Northern Ireland at the time, and therefore they weren't necessarily with their units, but all of our units were together, and we were actually the obvious choice.
What were the conditions like? What did you face once you were deployed?
Well, where to live was the first thing, because the soldiers, we were going to fly all the soldiers out, and it was going to take 250 wide-bodied jets, jumbo jets, to get us out there. And all the equipment was coming by sea, so it took us about 8 hours to fly there, and all the equipment 3 weeks. So we had to find somewhere to live, and we lived in 2 sheds on the quayside in Al Jubail. There were 5,000 of us in each of those 2 sheds, and it was very hot at the time. It was extremely unpleasant. And of course, where's all the food coming from? We were very lucky because the American Marines were there as well, and they looked after us and made certain that we had enough food to actually live with before our own compo rations started to arrive. And of course, one thing I remember deeply about that 6 months is we lived on compo rations for 6 months.
So the war lasted about 7 weeks. The ground offensive was only 3 days. Why was it so short?
Well, we all hoped that there wouldn't be a ground war. We couldn't see why Saddam Hussein, when he saw how effective the air campaign was going on, we couldn't see why he wouldn't pull out of Kuwait. Of course, you realise afterwards that he was actually demonstrating to the Americans that he was going to give them a bloody nose, and he didn't mind how many people he lost. So he was never going to pull out of Kuwait until the ground offensive started. And I can remember about 4 days before praying that it wouldn't be necessary. I mean, none of us wanted to do it. We were all concerned. I mean, the Iraqi army was, 400,000 men strong, and although it clearly wasn't well led and its equipment turned out to be not very good, we didn't know that at the time. And so we really didn't want to go and do it. But so it was not a surprise that it happened, but when it did happen, it was the quickest way of getting home. On the other hand, if it hadn't have happened, we would have had to have stayed in the desert for a long time, guarding the borders and keeping control over what happened in Iraq.
And how was morale amongst your men?
We spent 6 months in the desert, and a lot of the problems that we had was keeping morale up, keeping people focused on training. We couldn't do too much training because we'd used too much equipment, and also things like in the heat. If you do a lot of training, a lot of fitness training, what do you do about washing? All these sorts of practical problems came in. But morale was very good, and the units were all extremely well trained after 6 months, as you can imagine, in the desert. But still this business about, now we're going to be asked to kill people. And actually, when you think about it, very few of us have been in the Falklands War. I hadn't. A lot of us have been in Northern Ireland, but there you were reacting to people firing at you. Here we were saying to the soldiers, it's perfectly all right to kill people. We're going to fire first. And that is a jump, if you like, in the mindset of what you're trying to do. So you're trying to get everybody absolutely aware of what it was that was legal to do, what we were expecting people to do, but nevertheless, suddenly to soldiers, and the average age, 22, to say, right, it is fine, we're going to attack these people, we're going to kill these people, and we're going to win very quickly. It was a huge mindset change for them all.
The objective was achieved. Saddam Hussein did pull out of Kuwait, and that was really it then. Saddam was left, he wasn't pursued, was he? In hindsight, do you think that was the correct thing to have done?
The United Nations resolution was achieved. In other words, we got him to remove himself from Kuwait and all his forces from Kuwait. The actual mission of our military mission was the destruction of the Republican Guard, and that means kill everybody or take them prisoner and destroy their equipment. Of course, we didn't do that. And when we got to the ceasefire on the 28th of February, we knew that hadn't been achieved. But nevertheless, a great victory had been achieved. We defeated them, and that was the honourable moment to stop. What we didn't do was to follow on up to Baghdad. And should we have done that? And I'm quite clear in my own mind now, I was quite clear then, that we should not have done that. Because all that had happened is the same thing had happened in 2003. There would have been a huge vacuum in Iraq. Although we had many, many more troops there then, what would we have done? How would we have controlled Iraq? And that was never in our plans, never in the United Nations plans to do that.